back here now on the show to talk some more about the NFC South and some of the teams that I just finished talking about the Falcons in the last segment and Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts and their relationship. Now we're going to get to an overview of the entire division in the NFC South, just continuing on from the series that we've already started, the biggest remaining questions on each division going forward. We are on the NFC South today, so we're going to start off not with the Falcons, but we're going to start talking about one of the teams obviously in their division, talking about the New Orleans Saints. And the biggest thing for me with them is this whole, contract negotiation, right? That's a shock. Talking about that in this offseason where it's all been filled about contracts and how teams progress from it. The New Orleans Saints are no different. What's going to happen overall basically with Alvin Kamara and his contract? Because obviously not only is he arguably their most dynamic player, their best player on offense, maybe overall. Chris Olave has sort of edged his way into that conversation, but Kamara over the long haul, the recent years has been that guy for the New Orleans Saints, but now they are in a contract dispute, and how they figure it out, I think is going to say a lot about the Saints and the direction that they go overall with not only this team, but with Kamara as well. Where would he go after this? And basically, the context around all of this is that Kamara has made it pretty clear that this offseason that he would like a new contract, but maybe not an extension, but more so a restructuring of that. That was according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. Kamara would like to restructure it, strengthen the guaranteed amount of money in year one of the remaining 2 years that he has. But according again to Jeremy Fowler, no movement has been made from the Saints. They're not showing too many signs that they're eager about progressing with a restructured deal for Alvin Kamara. And specifically after reworking this contract potentially, he missed the last day of minicamp this offseason. So with that being the case, he said that once he missed those days in minicamp, it was contract related. So some probably thought that he could have held out of training camp, but that wasn't the case at all. He has been present, even though it has been pretty clear that he doesn't appear pretty happy about being there, just trying to avoid the fines in all reality. But in terms of his contract, he has 2 years left, like I said, on an original 5-year, $75 million deal agreed to in 2020. He's due $11.8 million this year, and then next year it becomes pretty significant, and why the Saints potentially aren't too eager about restructuring any deal, because next year he is due $25 million, but it's not guaranteed. So the Saints kind of have an out there and are rumored to be looking to potentially release him after this year just to not have to pay him that enormous amount of money for a running back. So that's really the feeling around it, and obviously Kamara doesn't want to get to that situation, because not only would it be extremely hard for a team to sign him after that, but also based on the fact that the market isn't particularly too favoring for running backs at all at this point in time. So it wouldn't look too great for him going forward after that. And if they do move on from him, what's going to be the case with this offense? What sort of identity are they going to create off of that? Who else is going to step up? Who's going to be their running back? This New Orleans Saints team could be very different heading into 2025 without Kamara if they decide to go down this route and not restructure his deal. So we'll stay tuned for any developments during the regular season. But for right now, that seems to be the biggest case with this team going forward. And now to move on to the next team, the Carolina Panthers. Around their new head coach and the cornerstone of their entire franchise, Bryce Young, can Dave Canales bring out the best in their young quarterback after a disastrous first year in the NFL? The biggest encouraging point from Dave Canales is that you already saw this sort of plan last year when he came in, or when he was the offensive coordinator for Baker Mayfield, coming in arguably a worse spot in his career than Bryce Young, because you look at Baker Mayfield coming in as potentially the starting quarterback and potentially being this guy for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, you didn't know it at the time, but he was arguably in a worse spot than Bryce Young was, because he had been around different teams already in the NFL. It was looking pretty Disappointing for Baker, a first overall pick, to just be moving around like this, but he found something here in Tampa Bay, and Dave Canales had a lot to do with that. So can he provide that same thing here for the Panthers? Because last year, the coaching was one of the main problems with Bryce Young. It was reported that Frank Reich and the offensive coordinator and just the coaching staff in general wasn't too direct and were kind of sending mixed signals, mixed messages to Bryce Young into what specifically this offense was supposed to look like. And you saw how right away Frank Reich was fired. They moved on from him, and just how poorly this team played overall last year. Not what you want to have for a rookie quarterback, sending him mixed signals already while he's dealing with so many other things off the field as well. So for Dave Canales to come in here, acknowledge that, and be in a similar situation where he's already sort of revived Baker Mayfield's career. It wouldn't be a revival per se, just because Bryce is in his second year, but a similar situation coming off of down years. Now can he provide some sort of spark, a clear message for Bryce Young to get the best out of him? Because they've already improved their roster. That was also another thing by default that was going to hold them back, not having enough weapons. But now they traded for Deontay Johnson, improved their defensive line or offensive line with Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis. They drafted some players, Xavier Legette, and Jonathan Brooks, the running back from Texas. So they got some guys there, some young guys, maybe not the top of the top yet, but it is an improvement overall to add to Adam Thielen and the offense that they had last year. So it's really just going to come down to Dave Canales, because the last thing also that you don't want to do is start cycling through these head coaches for Bryce Young early on in his career. So if they get that straight, I think it could be pretty enticing for this team, and it could definitely look better if they get this under wraps. Then, talking briefly now about the Atlanta Falcons. I don't want to spend too much time on them just because we just finished talking about them. But the biggest question to me, as it was during the time of the draft, is how will this Falcons defense be able to keep up with this improved offense? Because to me, I don't think it's a surprise that I wasn't too big of a fan of drafting Michael Penix, not because he's a bad player or anything like that, but it didn't fit what this Falcons team, I feel, needed. At the time, like I said, they were bottom 7 in offense, but this arrival of Kirk Cousins is by default going to make them better. So I thought the defensive side of the ball was where they needed to improve, but they drafted Michael Penix, and then they drafted some defensive players after that. But I do know that they have some good players on that sideline. Obviously, Jesse Bates is a stud. A.J. Terrell is great. Caden Ellis, their linebacker, isn't somebody that jumps off the page, but he had a solid year last year as well. So off of the back of that, they have some good players on this team, but the sack and the quarterback pressure, the pass rush overall, is the biggest thing for me. And they had an opportunity to get a guy like that, but they decided to go with Michael Penix. So now, how are they able to keep up and provide a better pass rush this year than last year? And for me, this defense was surprisingly, to my shock, was very decent or very good in some aspects. They were around the middle of the table to above average in a lot of these defensive categories, except the pass rush. So I figured that, that was going to be the main thing to address here now. But it wasn't the case for them going forward or with this decision to draft Michael Penix. So with that being the case, that's my biggest question. Can this defense step up? Because this offense is certainly going to be better going forward. So if they could address that, look out for the Falcons. With how highly I talked about Kyle Pitts, if they figure that out, it could be very exciting for them. And then the last team, just to mention here on the show, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this situation that they have going on with Randy Gregory. Technically a Bucs player, but he has not stepped foot in that organization or has been part of anything this offseason. Similarly to Alvin Kamara, trying to figure out a contract situation with him. Now he's skipping training camp as well. And the contract issues with him have led to this holdout, obviously. So it's bad that they're actually considering cutting him and not having him make the team at the end of the day, which is pretty surprising because I thought he could be a good option for depth at that position for the Buccaneers, because now with the situation going on with Yaya Diaby, their best pass rusher in my opinion, he got hurt. He suffered a high ankle sprain. He says that he's going to be ready for week 1, but you never know with an ankle sprain. They're a little bit weird to maneuver through to fully know that you're 100%. It is a little bit tricky to have a guy like Randy Gregory there for depth, potentially starting. Would have been great, but he's not there. So how they decide to pull the plug on this entire thing, maybe cave in to what he's asking for, to me that seems to be the biggest issue because they've improved everywhere else on the defensive side and on the offensive side of the ball, re-signing most of their guys. This seems to be the thing that is clouding over this team that is trying to build off of last year, winning the division, being in a tight game with the Detroit Lions. There is something there that they're trying to cook up, but when you have ugly situations like this off the field, it really puts a damper on things, and that's not something that this Bucs team needs at this point. And overall, just in terms of depth here, just to close it out, other than Joe Tryon, Shayinka, they don't really have too many other options outside of Yaya Diaby and Tryon Shayinka. They have the rookie, Chris Braswell, and Anthony Nelson as their only other two pass rushers, so they could potentially look to free agency to maybe try to add some other guys like Carl Lawson, Yannick Ngakoue, Tyus Bowser. Some of these guys, if they don't move on from Randy Gregory or don't move forward with Randy Gregory, they could actually look in free agency and try to pick some of these guys out if Yaya Diaby also isn't available as much as they would like in the regular season. So those are the main unanswered questions for the NFC South teams, things that they have to figure out to really have the best success in 2024. That is the NFC South. We're going to get to the other divisions at the start of next week, but for right now, we're going to head into a break, and we're going to talk about our last segment here on the show. Again, we started with the 49ers. We're going to end with the 49ers, this time talking about Deebo Samuel. Could we see one of the best seasons that Deebo has had this upcoming year with everything that's going on with Brandon Ayuk, the reports that he has been looking great in training camp? Could we see the old Deebo, the All-Pro, Pro Bowl Deebo in 2024 to step up if Brandon Ayuk does decide to leave? We're going to answer that question when we return after this break.